Have you ever wondered how psychologists conduct their research and what variables they consider? In psychology, variables are the keys to understanding the complex interplay between different factors. They help us track changes, observe effects, and understand the intricacies of human behavior. There are several types of variables that researchers consider, each playing its own unique role in a study. First, we have controlled variables. These are the constants, the elements that researchers keep steadily the same to ensure that any changes observed are due to the manipulation of the independent variable. Then, there are independent variables, the factors that researchers deliberately change or manipulate to observe their effects. Next, we have dependent variables, the outcomes that researchers measure, which are assumed to be affected by the independent variable. Lastly, we have extraneous and confounding variables. These are the wild cards, the unpredictable factors that could potentially influence the outcome of a study. Stay with us as we delve into each of these variables, starting with the controlled variable. First off, let's take a look at controlled variables. Picture yourself in a room. You're trying to study how noise levels affect your ability to concentrate. To do this, you'd play music at different volumes and observe the effects. Now, imagine if the temperature in that room kept changing. Would you be able to confidently say that it was the noise affecting your concentration and not the temperature? This is where controlled variables come in. Controlled variables are the conditions that researchers intentionally keep constant in an experiment. In our example, the room temperature would be a controlled variable. We'd keep it the same to ensure that any changes in concentration are due to the noise levels, our independent variable, and not anything else. In essence, controlled variables help us isolate the effects of the independent variable on the dependent one. So, controlled variables are those that researchers keep constant to ensure that the changes in the dependent variable are caused by the independent variable. Moving on, we have the independent variables. So, what exactly are they? Independent variables are the variables that researchers manipulate or control in their studies. Imagine you're that psychologist studying the effect of noise levels on concentration. In this case, the noise level is your independent variable because you, as the researcher, have control over it. You can decide to crank up the volume or turn it down low. But why is this important? Well, by changing the noise level, you're aiming to see how it affects concentration, which is your dependent variable. You're essentially trying to find out if changes in your independent variable, the noise level, cause changes in your dependent variable, the concentration levels. So, in a nutshell, independent variables are the factors that you, as a researcher, can change or control in your study. You choose to manipulate these variables to observe their effects on the dependent variables. In essence, independent variables are the factors that researchers manipulate or change to see their effects on the dependent variables. Next up, we have the dependent variables. Now, these are the variables that researchers measure in a study. They are called dependent because they depend on the independent variable. In other words, any changes in these variables are thought to be caused by changes in the independent variable. Let's take a simple real-life example. Going back to our study that's investigating the effect of noise level on concentration. Here, the noise level is the independent variable because it's the one being manipulated by the researcher. The concentration level of the participants, on the other hand, is the dependent variable because it's what's being measured. The researcher might predict that higher noise levels will result in lower levels of concentration. So, if the concentration levels change in response to different noise levels, we can say that the dependent variable has been affected by the independent variable. So, dependent variables are what researchers measure after manipulating the independent variables. If you're having trouble identifying the dependent variable, think about the results data being collected in the study. Last but not least, we have extraneous and confounding variables. These are the unseen actors on the stage of our research, potentially influencing our results without us even realizing it. Let's start with extraneous variables. These are any variables that aren't the independent variable, but could still affect the results of our study. For instance, let's think back to our example study investigating the impact of noise level on concentration. Here, the independent variable is the noise level, and the dependent variable is the concentration level. However, the time of day the study is conducted could potentially affect the participants' concentration levels. Morning people might concentrate better early in the day, while night owls might do better in the evening. This time of day variable is extraneous because it's not what we're studying, but it could still affect our results. So what about confounding variables? These are a specific type of extraneous variable that have affected the results of our study, apart from the independent variable. In our noise and concentration study, if we unknowingly tested more morning people in the morning and more night owls in the evening, the time of day would become a confounding variable. It would be providing an alternative explanation for our results. Maybe concentration isn't affected by noise level but by whether people are tested at their optimal time of day. The challenge with extraneous and confounding variables is that they can threaten the internal validity of our study. That's the ability of our study to demonstrate that changes in the independent variable cause changes in the dependent variable. If we don't control or at least monitor these variables, we might end up drawing incorrect conclusions from our study. In summary, extraneous and confounding variables are those that may affect the results of the study, apart from the independent variable. They're the hidden factors that can trip us up in our research if we're not careful. So keep a close eye out for them when designing your studies. There you have it. The different types of variables in psychological research. We've taken a journey through the controlled, independent, dependent, extraneous, and confounding variables. Each one plays a unique role in a study. Controlled variables are like the stagehands, keeping the scene steady while the actors, our independent and dependent variables, play out the main event. Independent variables set the scene, while dependent variables respond to their actions. Extraneous variables, meanwhile, are like unexpected guests, potentially throwing a wrench into our well-planned performance. We need to keep an eye on them to ensure they don't become confounding variables, those sneaky characters that can cloud our results, providing alternative explanations for our findings. Understanding these variables, it's crucial to interpreting the story and conducting valid and reliable psychological research. Thanks for watching.